The mountain didn't rumble so much as breathe a low, restless shudder that only Echo seemed to hear. The Belgian Malinois froze on the narrow trail, ears spearing forward, claws digging into the crusted snow. Wind knifed through the pines, carrying the sharp smell of iron and wet stone. Rowan Hale tightened his grip on the walking stick, breath steaming in the thin air. "What is it, girl?" he murmured. Echo whined, then surged upslope, nose to the ground, tail rigid. That was when Rowan heard it too faint beneath the wind. A single broken cry for help. The sound drifted through the storm like something unsure of its own existence, thin trembling swallowed by wind. Echo spun back toward Rowan, pupils blown wide, chest heaving with urgency. She tapped her paw twice on the frozen earth, then a third time, their old field signal for someone's alive. Rowan's pulse kicked hard. "Show me." They pushed deeper into the whiteout. Snow stung, his cheeks rattled against his jacket, blurred every edge of the world. Echo darted ahead, slicing through the drifts with purpose, stopping only to glance back and confirm he was still with her. The cry sounded again, closer, weaker. Rowan forced his legs faster. The trail narrowed into a cut of wind-scoured stone. Echo veered left, hackles rising, then skidded to a halt at the lip of a steep ravine. Rowan dropped beside her and peered down. A man lay half buried in snow, wedged between broken boulders, one arm raised, unmoving. Echo barked sharply, desperate, insistent. Rowan's breath clouded his throat, tightening with the memory of tunnels, rockmen screaming in the dark. Not now. Not again. He steadied himself, anchored the rope to a frostbitten pine, and whispered, "Hang on, we're coming." But as he began his descent, Echo stiffened ears, tilting toward the mountain's spine. Another sound surfaced beneath the storm, deep, rhythmic, unfamiliar. Not wind, not rock, not human. Something was moving under the mountain. The mountain quieted just enough for Rowan to breathe, but the echo of that deep, rhythmic sound stayed lodged behind his ribs like a cold splinter. As he rappelled down the ravine, wall snow sifted off the ledges in thin sheets, whispering down onto the injured man below. Echo paced the rim above her silhouette, a dark, restless figure against the gray sky. "Easy," Rowan muttered to himself as the rope swayed. His gloved hands worked with practiced precision muscle memory, carved from years of extraction work, in places no one sane should have been. His breath fogged inside the helmet vision, narrowing to the man half buried in the drift. The stranger's face was bloodless, lips cracked and blue eyes half-lidded. Rowan dropped the last 6 feet and landed beside him in a crouch. "Sir, can you hear me?" Rowan's voice softened, steady. "You're going to be all right." The man blinked once, painfully slow. Slipped. Rock gave out. His voice rasped like dry leaves. Thought, nobody'd hear. "Lucky for you, my partner hears everything." Above, Echo barked once, as if to punctuate the sentence. Rowan checked the man's leg. Bad break, splinted wrong. Could have gone into shock hours ago. He cut through the straps of the ruined climbing harness and wrapped emergency insulation around the man's chest. "What's your name?" Rowan asked. "G. Giles," he whispered. "Okay, Giles, stay with me." Rowan lifted his head toward the ridge. Echo ready, the dog leaned over the edge-tail straight, waiting for the command. Rowan clipped Giles into the rescue sling, tied his own harness beneath him for stability, and tugged the rope twice. Echo pulled. Hard. That was the thing about Echo, small for her breed, but forged from steel and sinew. When Rowan needed an anchor, she became one. When he needed warning, she became that too. And when Rowan needed to believe in something loyal, she became his proof. They rose inch by inch until the ravine's lip met Rowan's knees. Snow blurred his vision. His muscles screamed. Giles slipped once, dead weight, dragging the rope dangerously. Echo reacted instantly, digging into the snow, lowering her center of gravity, growling through clenched teeth as she braced the entire line. "Easy," Rowan gasped, heaving Giles over the edge. Echo held until Rowan cleared the rim, then collapsed into the snow, panting. Rowan knelt beside her, resting his forehead against hers. "Good girl," he whispered. "Good. Good girl." She licked frost from his cheek and looked toward the mountain again, ears pricked, eyes dark and wary. That low vibration was gone now. But the way Echo kept searching the slopes, it hadn't left her mind. They carried Giles back to Rowan's cabin more accurately. Rowan half-carried him while Echo trotted beside, glancing between man and mountain like a creature torn between duty and instinct. The cabin stood alone in a clearing of wind-stunted pines, built from heavy timber, stained a deep walnut roof pitch steep for snow runoff. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Rowan had left the stove burning that morning, expecting a quiet day of solitude after supply runs in town. The mountains had other plans. Inside, the heat hit like a blessing. Rowan eased Giles onto the couch, Echo circling once before, settling on guard beside him. Steam rose from the kettle Rowan set on the stove, filling the air with pine needle tea and ember warmth. "You live out here alone," Giles croaked. Rowan shrugged. "Me and her." Giles looked at Echo. "That dog saved my life." "Twice today," Rowan murmured, bandaging the man's leg. Giles winced. "I heard something before I fell. Thought it was thunder. But it wasn't. It was lower. Just wrong." Rowan paused. "You heard it too." Giles nodded weakly. Sounded like the mountain groaned. Rowan taped the last compression strip across Giles's shin and rose slowly. His reflection in the window looked older than his 42 years, lined jaw, dark hair clipped, close stubble, grown uneven. But his eyes were what strangers noticed, watchful, guarded, always calculating exits. Echo pressed her head against his thigh, seeking reassurance or offering it, Rowan never knew which. He swept a hand through her fur. "I heard it." "And the dog?" Giles asked. She felt it first. Echo lifted her chin at her name. Amber eyes steady. "You think it was a quake?" Giles whispered. "No," Rowan said quietly. "The ground didn't shake. The air did." They let the words settle. Snow ticked against the windows like tiny knuckles knocking. "I radioed the station," Rowan said. "Rangers are sending a snow runner to pick you up." Giles closed his eyes, relief softening the lines of his face. "I owe you." "Nobody owes me," Rowan said. But Echo shifted her weight uncomfortably as if she disagreed. When the Ranger snow runner arrived, Rowan handed Giles off with brief instructions for the medics, refusing thanks, nodding only once as the machine sped into the swirling white. Snow deepened to silence. Rowan's cabin seemed to exhale around him. He leaned against the doorframe, the steam of his breath rising in the dimming evening. Echo sat beside him, gaze locked on the mountain ridge. "You heard more than we did, didn't you?" Rowan whispered. Echo tapped her paw once, twice, 3 times. Her old SAR signal danger below. Rowan rubbed his face. "I'll check tomorrow." Echo huffed. Tomorrow wasn't soon enough. Her tail stiffened ears, rotating to a place Rowan couldn't yet see. "I'm serious," he said. "I promised myself no more tunnels, no more digging men out of rock." Echo didn't look away. She would wait. But she wanted him to understand the mountain wasn't finished speaking. Night blanketed the ridge with wet, heavy snowfall. Rowan fed the stove and unrolled his bedding on the floor next to Echo's usual spot. He never slept in the bed upstairs. Beds reminded him of too many nights in too many barracks with too many men who didn't come back. The fire popped. A warm orange glow flickered across the cabin walls, catching on the framed map Rowan kept above the mantel, a topographical sketch of Eagle Torch ridge lines inked by hand. Rowan had found it nailed to an old ranger post when he first arrived months ago. Echo Rose walked to the map and stared at one deep fold in the terrain, an unmarked gorge beneath the peak. She whined softly. "You're stuck on that, huh?" Rowan said. She touched her nose to the inked ridge. Rowan sat beside her. "Why there?" Echo pressed her paw 3 sharp taps, directly against the map. Rowan felt a tremor of unease coil beneath his ribs. "Echo, whatever's there. I'm not going back underground." He wasn't sure she understood the words, but she understood the weight of them. Echo leaned her head into his chest, warm and solid. Rowan closed his eyes. He saw the old mind collapse again, the screams, the choking dust, the crushing silence after. His lungs seized at the memory. He steadied himself with Echo's fur. "Not tonight," he whispered. Echo lay down reluctantly, but her gaze never left the ridge beyond the window. Morning broke pale and brittle. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky scraped clean by wind, cold blue, nearly translucent. Rowan stepped onto the porch with a mug of steaming tea. Echo followed, sniffing the air with sharp intent. Snow blanketed the valley in unbroken dunes, fresh untouched, except Echo growled. Tiny disturbances pocked the snow line near the trees, a trail of footprints half swallowed by drift. Human. Moving toward Rowan's cabin at some point during the night. He followed the tracks to where they suddenly ended near the edge of the pines. No return prints, no wandering, just a straight line in, then nothing out. Echo sniffed the ground aggressively, tail whipped low. She circled 3 times, then gave her signal, 1 tap, 2 taps, 3 taps. Below, danger below. But beneath the snow lay only frozen earth. Rowan crouched, checking the trees. Could have been someone checking for a lost hiker, he muttered, though he didn't believe it. Echo didn't either. Her hackles raised sharply, nose pointed toward the ridge. Something in the mountain was drawing her like a magnet. Rowan straightened, breath frosting. "All right, you win. We'll take a closer look." Echo's tail lifted but didn't wag. She wasn't excited, she was preparing. The trail up Eagle Torch Ridge was thin as a scar and twice as treacherous. Rowan moved slow, scanning the slope eye narrowed against the glare. Echo darted ahead but never out of sight, her movements efficient and silent. They stopped on a plateau, where wind had carved the cliff face into a smooth curve of granite. Rowan rested his gloves on his knees, exhaling fog. Echo froze. Her body went rigid, tail straight, ears angled at a boulder ahead. She tapped her paw 3 times. Rowan approached cautiously. At the base of the boulder, snow had fallen unevenly, thicker at one edge, thinner at the other. He brushed away a layer and found metal beneath his palm, cold, rusted round. Not boulder. Man-made. A circular iron hatch buried beneath decades of winter. Rowan's breath caught. "No," he whispered. "No, no. I'm not doing tunnels again." Echo stepped in front of him, blocking his retreat, tapping once hard. He stared at the hatch. Wind howled around him, lifting strands of his dark hair. "Who put this here?" Rowan murmured. The mountain offered no answer. But Echo lowered her head and growled low, deep warning of something beneath, alive, moving, waiting. Rowan looked at her and exhaled. Soft. Resigned. "All right," he whispered. "Let's open it." He gripped the frozen wheel handle with shaking hands. The hatch turned. Something warm breathed upward from the darkness below. Echo stepped backward, tail tucked, not in fear but in recognition. Rowan felt the air shift around him, tasted iron and stone and something older than the ridge itself. He lifted the hatch fully. A rush of warm mist escaped, humid, fragrant, unnatural for winter. Rowan stared into the dim shaft spiraling below. "What is that?" Echo barked once. Behind him, the wind died abruptly. Rowan felt eyes unseen watching from the forest line. He turned. No one was there. But a fresh set of footprints, larger than before, now trailed toward his cabin. Echo growled. Someone had been following them. And whatever waited beneath the mountain wasn't meant to stay buried. Cliffhanger, end of section. Warm air drifted up from the opened hatch, so strange, so out of place, that Rowan felt his pulse thicken in his throat. Echo's ears pinned back, nose working furiously as she leaned into the rising mist. The shaft below exhaled again, as if the mountain were breathing out secrets it had trapped for decades. Rowan wiped frost from his gloves. "It shouldn't be warm," he said under his breath. "Ground temperature here barely cracks 40 in summer." Echo gave a short, tense grunt. Rowan angled his flashlight into the opening. The beam cut a spiraling metal ladder, descending into a narrow tunnel of carved stone. A trickle of condensation ran down the walls, catching the light like silver threads. The deeper the beam traveled, the brighter the stone shimmered, veins of pale mineral reflecting strangely. His breath stilled. This wasn't natural. Someone had built this. Echo shifted closer to the hatch, tail stiff. She sniffed once, then tapped her paw 3 times against the rock, firm, certain, insistent. Alive, below. Danger below. Rowan's chest tightened. Tunnels were where he'd lost them. 2 men buried in an Afghan mountainside, because the rock shifted an inch too far, a breath too late. He still heard their voices when he closed his eyes. He swallowed hard. No, not again. But Echo barked sharply, stepping onto the hatch, rim gaze locked on his. Not commanding, pleading. A gust of wind swept the ridge, then throwing snow in spirals across the ledge. The storm was rebuilding in the west. Rowan felt the shift in pressure against his skin. They didn't have long. Behind them the pines creaked. A single echoing thump rolled down from a higher slope. Rowan turned sharply. No falling rock, no branch dropping. Footsteps. Someone was up here with them, or had been moments ago. Echo whipped her head toward the sound, growl deepening. Rowan's jaw set. Whoever had left the prints near his cabin last night might be watching now. And the hatch wasn't random. Someone had opened it recently. He shone the light closer. The hinges were clean. No frozen rust. No ice buildup. Someone had pried the hatch free before he reached it. "All right," Rowan whispered. His breath plumed white. "We go in. Quick look. Only the first chamber. Then we regroup." Echo didn't move until he clipped the rope to his harness. They had their system. If Rowan slipped, Echo braced the line. If Echo signaled danger, Rowan listened. He descended. His boots touched the first rung of the ladder, metal cold enough to burn through the glove. The stone walls hummed faintly with unseen currents. Echo whined once from above, pacing. Then when Rowan reached the 3rd rung, she leapt gracefully onto the ladder behind him, climbing downward by pushing her paws against the stone. Rowan looked up at her in disbelief. "I didn't say you had to follow." Echo stared down at him. He exhaled. Yeah, I figured. They moved slowly, rung by rung, the shaft tightening as they descended. After 20 feet, Rowan's boots hit solid ground. He stepped aside so Echo could drop beside him. The chamber opened ahead, a narrow corridor carved from volcanic stone, warm enough that Rowan felt sweat bead under his jacket. The smell was clean, almost metallic, like purified water. He moved forward cautiously. The tunnel curved gently, walls etched with strange parallel grooves, too precise to be natural but too old to belong to modern blasting tools. Echo padded ahead, low and alert. Her tail froze in midair. She sniffed a dark smear on the wall, faint, nearly dry. Rowan crouched. He touched it with gloved fingers. Soot. Fresh. He swept his flashlight upward. A scorch mark arced across the ceiling. The stone showed heat stress. Fire, Rowan whispered. Down here, Echo let out a quiet, uneasy whine. As Rowan straightened, something crackled beneath his boot. He knelt again and found a shattered piece of glass embedded in the dust edges, glinting. He picked it up carefully. A fragment of a surveyor's gauge, industrial high-end used by professional geological teams. Rowan's stomach dropped. What are you doing here, old girl? He murmured to the shard. And who brought you down? Echo tapped twice, then 3 times. Danger ahead. Danger below. His breath shortened. We shouldn't be here long. But Echo nudged him forward, insisting. Not carelessly, purposefully. Rowan followed the dog deeper until the corridor widened into a vaulted chamber shaped like a dome. The stone floor was perfectly smooth, polished by tools Rowan didn't recognize. At the center stood a massive pillar of crystal-like mineral rising from the ground, glowing faintly from within. Rowan gaped. God, what is this place? The mineral hummed softly, low rhythmic, the same frequency Rowan had heard through the storm. Heat radiated gently from the pillar, warming the chamber. Echo sniffed around it, tail lowered, ears flattening to her skull. She circled the crystal once, then froze at its base. Rowan hurried to her. What is it? She barked, not loud but sharp. She stepped aside, revealing a metal casing, half buried in sediment, small, rectangular, with a blinking red light. Rowan's blood turned to ice. A listening device. Active. Someone's monitoring this place. As he reached toward it, a faint click echoed in the chamber. Echo lunged, knocking Rowan aside just as a mechanical squeal screeched from the far wall. Stone shifted. A metal grate slammed down over the entrance of the domed chamber, sealing them inside. Rowan stumbled to his feet. No Echo clawed at the bars, growling savagely. Footsteps echoed above, faint but unmistakable. Someone moving fast. Someone retreating. We're not trapped, Rowan said quickly. There has to be another exit. There, a second sound cut him off. A deep, grinding groan. Not from the crystal. Not from the grate. From the ceiling. Rowan looked up as hairline cracks splintered across the dome, dust raining down. The ceiling was collapsing. Echo move. They sprinted toward the far side of the chamber where a narrow fissure cut through the rock, an emergency vent maybe decades old. Echo reached it first, wedged her head through, then shoved her shoulders. Rowan lunged behind her as the first slab of stone crashed to the ground inches from his heels. Go, he shouted. Echo barked frantically until Rowan grabbed her harness and shoved himself into the crack behind her. The passageway squeezed them tight, forcing Rowan to crawl on elbows and knees. Stone thundered behind them. Keep going, Rowan gasped. Echo scrambled ahead, claws scraping rock as the tunnel spit them out into a secondary shaft angled upward. They clawed their way toward daylight, Rowan's lungs burning. Echo leapt first, bursting through a snow crust into open air. Rowan dragged himself out after her. The hatch slammed shut behind them from the force of the collapse below. Both collapsed into the snow, panting, shaking. After a long silence, Rowan whispered, "Someone tried to kill us in there." Echo pressed against him, trembling with leftover adrenaline. He looked at the ridge. The snow was still, pines unmoving. But somewhere in that silence, Rowan knew someone was watching. And now that Rowan had seen the chamber, they wouldn't stop. Rowan clenched his jaw. This is bigger than a hiker or a storm. Echo tapped her paw once, then twice, then a hard third tap. Not bigger. Closer. Rowan stared down at her. We have to warn someone. But first he looked back at the sealed hatch. We're going back down. Tonight. Before they can hide what they left behind, Echo's tail stiffened fear, resolve both. But she didn't back away. Rowan rose, brushing snow from his coat. Let's move. We're not the only ones climbing this mountain today. Cliffhanger, someone waits at Rowan's cabin door, footprints leading directly to the porch. The footprints at Rowan's cabin weren't softened by wind. They were fresh. Sharp edges, deep impressions. Someone heavier than the ranger they rescued, someone carrying weight or equipment. Echo bounded ahead nose, skimming the snow. She growled quietly, a low vibration from deep in her chest. Rowan followed, with one hand hovering near the hatchet strapped to his belt. When they reached the porch, the prince stopped directly in front of the door, not beside it, not circling, directly facing it like the person stood there a long time waiting for entry or permission. Rowan approached, slowly, boots creaking. Echo pressed close, hackles rising. The door stood slightly ajar. He hadn't left it that way. Rowan rested his palm against Echo's ribs, a silent command to stay behind him as he nudged the door open with the toe of his boot. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. No sound from the stove, no creak of settling beams, just a draft curling in from the open door, lifting a thin curtain of ash from the hearth. Rowan scanned the room. Nothing missing at first glance. But on the table, neatly placed as if arranged for him to find, lay a folded sheet of paper. Echo approached first, sniffing the corner's muscles tense. Rowan flipped it open. Only one line was written in precise block letters. "Leave the ridge. Nobody has to get buried again." His vision tightened, his lungs shortened. For a moment, the old memory slammed back the ceiling of the Afghan tunnel, collapsing dust, swallowing the world, his men shouting, Rowan digging bare-handed until nails splintered. He shut his eyes. Echo nudged his hand roughly, forcing him back into the present. "Easy," Rowan whispered. "I'm here." But the message pulsed like a bruise under his skin. Somebody knew, not just who he was, what he feared. He refolded the paper and tucked it into his jacket. "We're not going anywhere," he muttered. Echo tapped her paw once, agreement, then twice, caution, then a third time, danger approaching. Rowan's head snapped toward the ridge. A distant engine growled. A snowmobile crested the rise, kicking up a plume of frozen powder. Rowan recognized the uniform silhouette long before the machine slid to a stop. Ranger Lieutenant Sarah Cade, lean, sharp-eyed, a woman who didn't waste words or movements. She removed her goggles and scanned the cabin with cool precision. "You hail," she called. Rowan nodded. "What's wrong? You tell me." She hopped off the vehicle. "We found the hiker you rescued. His story didn't match his gear. He said he slipped, but that harness rope cut clean through." "Cut," Rowan repeated. "Deliberate," she said. "And he kept asking if anyone else was found down there." Rowan and Cade locked eyes. Echo growled. Cade exhaled. "We also found tracks leading toward your cabin. Fresh, large boot prints. Whoever left them didn't want to be seen." Rowan stepped aside, showing the open door. They were inside. Cade stiffened. "Did they take anything?" "No," Rowan said. "But they left something." He handed her the note. She read it once, jaw flexing. "Whoever wrote this knows your history. They're trying to push me off the ridge." "Well," Cade said, slipping the note into an evidence sleeve. If they wanted subtlety, they failed. Echo padded to the corner and tapped twice at the floorboard beneath the map of Eagle Torch Ridge. Cade frowned. "She do that often, only when something's wrong," Rowan said. "Good," Cade replied. She lowered her voice. "Because you're about to see something else that's wrong." From her jacket, she produced a sealed plastic bag containing a broken metal device, scorched wires exposed. Rowan's stomach dropped. "Where did you find that?" "Near the ravine, under snow. Same firing residue we found in a burned-out maintenance shed last week. It matched the sabotage he'd seen in the tunnel." Cade zipped the case shut. "Someone's doing more than hiking." Echo barked once sharply. Rowan pointed at Cade. "There's something under the mountain. An engineered chamber, and someone tried to trap us in there." Cade blinked. "You went underground briefly. The tunnel nearly collapsed." He pointed at Echo. "She saved me." Cade studied Rowan's expression. Something in her eyes softened, not pity, but recognition. "You think whoever's behind this is using the tunnels?" she asked. "I know they are," Rowan said. Cade adjusted her jacket zipper. "Then I want to see that chamber." Rowan stepped back. "No. You don't understand. You found active sabotage, Hale, and someone left you a warning about people getting buried. My job is to make sure that doesn't happen." Echo stepped between them and tapped her paw 3 times. "Below. Danger below." Cade's brows rose. "That means something, doesn't it?" "It does," Rowan said quietly. Cade nodded, accepting it without mockery. "Then we follow her lead." Echo froze suddenly, nose lifting toward the wind. Then she broke into a run, snow kicking up behind her as she sprinted east toward the tree line. Rowan swore and took off. Echo holed Cade chased after them. "What's she tracking?" Cade shouted. Rowan didn't answer. He already knew. Echo led them to the ravine where they'd rescued Giles, but not to the rescue site. She skidded down a shallower slope pause, slicing through powder until she reached a dense cluster of cedar. Rowan slid beside her, breath punching out. "What is it, girl?" he whispered. Echo circled the cedars, nose pressed low. She tapped twice. Cade drew her sidearm. "Something's here." Rowan swept snow away from the roots, revealing torn bark and footprints. 3 sets. Heavy boots, drag marks, and blood. Not fresh, not frozen, but smeared across the tree trunk like the person had grabbed it while being pulled away. Cade leaned close. "This is human." Rowan nodded once. Then Echo stiffened ears, pricked to a sharp angle. She darted deeper between the trees, finding another mark, this one etched into the bark, a circle with a diagonal slash. Cade exhaled sharply. "I've seen that. That's the sigil used by Helix Terra," Rowan frowned. "Never heard of them. They're a private land development consortium," Cade said. "Ruthless reputation. They've been pushing into every ridgeline near this valley." Rowan's jaw flexed. "And now they're here." Cade nodded grimly. "This is their symbol for unsafe terrain. Except that's a lie. It usually means priority target." Echo tapped 3 times, fur trembling. Rowan felt ice crawl across his spine. "If they mark this, then the tunnels are where they want to drill," Cade finished, "and anyone near them becomes a problem." A low rumble echoed from the mountain's belly. Echo backed up, tail tucked, growling at the ground beneath her paws. Cade tensed. "Is that another collapse?" "No," Rowan said softly. "It's the same sound I heard yesterday." The mountain breathed again, deep, resonant, unnatural. "And somebody wants to control whatever's making that sound," Rowan murmured. Cade stared at him. "Then we have to get into the tunnels before they do." Rowan recoiled. "I'm not taking anyone down there. I barely got out." "You're not thinking clearly," Cade snapped. "If they're sabotaging the mountain, the whole ridge could fail." Echo pressed against Rowan's leg, not urging him toward the tunnels, but closer to Cade. A choice. A team. Rowan closed his eyes. A memory flashed dust, choking him the tunnel roof, caving his men screaming for help, Rowan clawing until his fingers bled, until everything went silent. He swallowed. "I'm not losing anyone underground," he said. "You won't," Cade replied. "You'll have me. And her." Echo barked once, sharp, decisive. Rowan opened his eyes, the decision already made. "Fine," he said. "We go in at dusk. Less visibility for anyone watching." Cade holstered her weapon. "I'll bring gear." But before she mounted her snowmobile, she paused. "There's one more thing you should know," she said. "Helix Terra has a CEO, Cassandra Rourke, cold as the granite she drills." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "What does she want with this ridge?" Cade exhaled. "Power hail. The aquifer under this mountain could supply half the state. Whoever controls it controls everything." Rowan turned toward Echo. The dog lifted her snout toward the ridge, expression fierce. "Then we can't let her have it," Rowan said. Cade nodded once and drove off. As the engine faded into the trees, Rowan knelt beside Echo and rested his forehead against hers. "You ready for this?" Echo tapped her paw. 1, 2, 3. Danger below. But she was with him. Rowan rose. "We go tonight." The wind shifted. And far above, somewhere in the white peaks, a faint mechanical click echoed through the stone like someone setting a trap in the dark. By dusk, the ridge shifted from bone-white glare to muted violet. The sky bled lavender over the jagged spine of Eagle Torch, and the storm that had threatened earlier gathered like a bruise on the western horizon. Wind braided through the pines in uneasy breaths. Rowan prepared in silence. He set a headlamp on the table, checked the harness twice, inspected the climbing rope for frays. Each movement was crisp, deliberate muscle memory, resisting the panic that tried crawling up his throat. Echo lay by the stove, watching him with bright, steady eyes. "You don't have to go down with me," Rowan said, though they both knew it wasn't true. Echo rose, padded over, and touched her nose to his hand. Then she tapped the floor, 1, 2, 3, gentle, reassuring. "I know," Rowan whispered. "You're not afraid of the dark. I am." He cinched the strap on his pack. The room dimmed as clouds swallowed the last scraps of sunlight. Rowan's reflection in the window flickered between shapes: soldier, wanderer, survivor, a man who'd tried to bury himself in solitude but dug up something much older, something unwilling to stay hidden. A soft knock cut through the cabin. Echo spun, growling deep. Rowan froze. A second knock measured knuckles, striking wood with the steady rhythm of someone who didn't fear what stood on the other side. Rowan approached the door cautiously. "Who is it, Sarah Cade?" He exhaled and opened the door. The ranger stepped inside, shaking snow from her coat. Her cheeks flushed red from the cold, dark hair matted beneath a wool cap. She held a metal case under one arm. "You ready?" she asked. "No," Rowan answered. "But I'm going." Cade smirked lightly. Close enough. She set the metal case on the table, flipped the latches, and revealed a compact, ground-penetrating radar scanner with a digital display. You brought a toy, Rowan muttered. I brought a tool, Cade corrected. We need a map of what's under the ridge. The chamber you found might not be the only one. Rowan nodded, once the tension in his jaw tightening. And she added, pulling out a second item, body cams. No, Rowan said immediately. Absolutely not. Cameras screw with light perception underground. Distracting. Dangerous. It's protocol, Cade said. I'm not losing situational awareness. She held his gaze. We need proof, Rowan. Proof of sabotage. Proof of illegal excavation. You said someone tried to kill you down there. Rowan's breath cooled in his chest. They'll try again. All the more reason for evidence. He looked away, fingers flexing. Echo barked twice neutral, assessing, then stepped closer to Cade, sniffing the equipment. After a moment, she sat beside the case and stared at Rowan expectantly. Cade raised an eyebrow. Your dog agrees with me, Traitor Rowan muttered. Echo whipped her tail, once amused. He gave in. Fine, but I'm not wearing the camera. You are. Cade clipped the device to her jacket. Works for me. Snow hardened outside as the temperature dropped. The ridge's shadow stretched over the clearing, a long, dark limb curling toward the cabin. Rowan slung his rope over his shoulder. We leave now. They hiked in silence at first, their breath pluming into the cold like two columns of smoke. The wind sharpened, slicing through the treetops with a hissing edge. Echo ranged ahead, sniffing every drift, every broken branch, every hidden pocket of scent. Halfway up the ridge, Cade broke the quiet. You never told me your specialty, she said. In the army, she nodded. Rowan took a slow breath. Combat engineering. That explains the rope work. And the nightmares, Rowan added, monotone. Cade didn't flinch. She kept her pace steady beside him. You lost people underground. Yeah, you did what you could. Rowan's jaw clicked. I didn't do enough. Echo slowed her pace, returning to walk between them as if sensing the weight of the words. Cade's voice softened. Then don't repeat it. Not tonight. He didn't answer, but he didn't argue either. By the time they reached the plateau where the iron hatch lay, buried, night had fully settled. Snow reflected their headlamp beams in shifting halos. Echo circled the hatch once, testing the air, then tapped her paw sharply. Clear for now. Rowan brushed snow from the metal wheel. It turned more easily this time, as if someone had lubricated the hinges. He exchanged a look with Cade. That doesn't bother you, she asked. It does. Good. Means you're still rational. Rowan lifted the hatch. Warm air spilled out, fogging their headlamps. Echo descended first paws, gripping the ladder rungs with practiced ease. Rowan followed her. Cade came last, closing the hatch behind them. The shaft swallowed their light. Darkness pressed like damp cloth against Rowan's shoulders. He breathed carefully, counting heartbeats. 4 in, 4 out. Echo waited at the bottom tail level, ears angled forward. Rowan dropped beside her boots, landing with a muted thud. Cade reached the ground. Temperatures warm, ground moisture's high. Rowan nodded. Same as before. Airflow is steady. Means there's a ventilation system somewhere. Or a breach, Cade muttered. They walked. Echo led them through the corridor of etched stone past the scorch marks Rowan had found earlier. Cade crouched to examine them. These were made by a thermal cutter, she said. Industrial grade, not something a recreational mining group would use. They're cutting towards something, Rowan said quietly. Echo's ears flattened agreement. They continued until the corridor opened into the domed chamber, or what remained of it. Rowan's breath caught. The chamber wasn't collapsed as he'd expected. Not fully. The stone slabs he'd heard falling had been cleared, stacked carefully against the walls like someone had returned to clean the debris. Cade scanned the room slowly. Someone got here before us. Rowan stepped forward, checking the crystal pillar's base. The device he'd found earlier, the listening module, was gone. Only a rectangular indent remained where it had been. Cade lifted her scanner. The radar pulsed, sending waves through the crystal. What's it reading? Rowan asked. Something inside it, Cade muttered. Something metallic. Inside the pillar, yeah. Echo circled the pillar, sniffing upward. She tapped once unusual alert. Rowan crouched. What is it? Echo whined and stepped back from the stone tail, lowering in unease. Rowan pressed his ear to the crystal. A thrum vibrated through the mineral, subtle, steady, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. He recoiled. It's active. Alive, Cade asked. No, Rowan said. Not alive. Engineered. Cade ran the scanner again, her breath hitched. Rowan, this pillar isn't stone. It's a water regulator. Rowan stared. Come again, Cade swallowed. It's a part of an aquifer control system. Ancient, maybe, but functional. Someone built this chamber to protect the mountain's water supply. Rowan's voice went low, and someone else wants to control it. Cade lowered the scanner. Helix Terra. Echo growled, suddenly spinning toward the corridor they'd just entered. Rowan stiffened. "What is it, girl?" Echo barked, once warning, then twice urgent. Then a rapid third tap, danger approaching fast. Bootsteps echoed down the tunnel. Rowan grabbed Cade, pulling her behind the pillar. Lights flickered at the far end of the corridor, a cluster of flashlights bobbing in sync. Cade's hand dove for her sidearm. "How many? 3? Maybe 4, Rowan whispered. Voices drifted closer. Schedule moved up. Rourke wants extraction tonight. Clear the chamber before the next shift. Set the charges near the regulator. Cade stiffened. Charges. Rowan's heartbeat thundered. They're planning to blow the aquifer controls. Cade's face paled. If they destabilize this system, the entire ridge could flood. Or collapse. Echo crouched, low muscles bunching, waiting for Rowan's signal. The flashlights grew brighter. Closer. Rowan clenched his jaw. "We can't let them inside this chamber," he whispered. Cade nodded once. "Then we intercept." Rowan's hand tightened on his rope carabiner, breath cooling. The men entered the chamber. Echo growled, teeth bared in silent fury. Rowan whispered, "Now." And Echo lunged. Echo hit the first intruder like a bolt of compressed lightning, silent until impact. Her weight drove him backward, his flashlight spinning across the stone floor. He shouted, stumbling, arms flailing, but Echo already had his wrist pinned beneath a crushing bite, forcing the detonator he carried to clatter away. Rowan moved the instant Echo struck. He lunged from cover, slammed his shoulder into the second man's sternum, and drove him into the wall hard enough to knock the air out of him. The third man spun, reaching for the pistol holstered under his jacket, but Cade's aim was faster. "Drop it," she barked. The man froze almost. He twitched fingers, hooking the pistol grip anyway. A rookie mistake. Cade fired once, striking the stone inches from his boot. The blast ricocheted, sending chips flying. The man yelped and dropped the weapon, hands raised. "Everyone down," Cade shouted. But the fourth intruder, who'd hung back in the corridor, threw a small cylinder into the chamber. Rowan recognized it instantly. Flashbang. He tackled Cade, dragging her behind the pillar. Echo flung herself away from the first assailant and dove under Rowan's arm just as the grenade detonated. A blinding sheet of white seared the chamber, followed by a concussive pop that rattled Rowan's teeth. Even shielded the blast left Rowan blinking spots. Echo whined, head-shaking, ears pinned flat in pain. "She okay?" Cade asked. "She will be." The fourth intruder re-emerged, sprinting toward the pillar, straight for the indentation where the listening module had been. He slapped a new device into place. A blinking green disc. Rowan swore. "He's tagging the regulator. Stop him," Cade yelled. But he was fast-trained, efficient. He spun, drew a collapsible baton, and aimed for Echo as she regained her footing. "No, you don't." Rowan surged forward. The baton arced toward Echo's skull. Rowan intercepted it with his forearm. Pain flared as metal connected with bone, but he latched onto the man's jacket and ripped him backward, slamming him onto the stone. They grappled, fists cracking against ribs and jaw. The intruder fought like someone with nothing to lose. Cade disarmed another attacker with a knee strike and pinned him with practiced ease. Echo recovered, shook her head hard, and bounded toward the tag disc. She clamped down on it, ripping it from the crystal and tossing it aside like trash. Good girl. The intruder Rowan fought grabbed Rowan's hair and tried to slam his head against the stone, but Rowan shifted his weight, flipping him onto his side. He pinned the man with a knee to the chest and yanked off the intruder's mask. A chiseled jawline, ice-gray eyes, mid-30s, a professional. "Who sent you?" Rowan demanded. The man spat blood. "You're already dead, Hale." Rowan stiffened. The man knew his name. Before Rowan could press, the intruder kicked off the wall, twisting free. He rolled, grabbed the dropped pistol, and aimed. Cade shouted. Rowan Echo launched herself at him, jaws locking on his forearm. The gun discharged into the stone sparks, spraying. The man screamed, jerking violently, trying to shake her loose. Rowan lunged, shoving the pistol aside. He twisted the attacker's arm until it cracked. A guttural scream filled the chamber, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Cade cuffed the other two intruders with zip ties. "You okay?" she asked Rowan. "Fine," Rowan said, breath ragged. Echo released the man's crushed arm only when Rowan ordered softly, "Off." The intruder slumped unconscious. Cade exhaled in shock. "Your dog's a damn miracle." "She's trained," Rowan said quietly, resting a hand on Echo's flank, "and smarter than most people." Echo looked up at him with amber eyes, panting the briefest flicker of pride in her posture. But Rowan's relief was short-lived. Something was wrong. The chamber vibrated soft at first, then stronger, then violently. The crystal pillar pulsed like a living organ light flaring inside it. "What's happening?" Cade shouted over the rising hum. Rowan stared. The tag device Echo pulled it off, but it might have activated something. The humming deepened, shaking dust from the ceiling. Echo whined, sharp, urgent, and tapped her paw 3 times. Below, danger below, immediate. The ground quaked. A crack tore across the chamber floor, slicing between Rowan and the unconscious attacker. Stone split with a metallic groan. Cade dove for the radar scanner as the ground heaved beneath her boots. "Rowan, we need to move." "The regulator's destabilizing," Rowan grabbed Echo's harness. "We're leaving." But the corridor they'd entered from now swirled with thick dust, the collapse threatening to seal them in. Cade pointed to the opposite end of the chamber where a narrow tunnel branched upward, half hidden behind stacked debris. That shaft go, Rowan sprinted toward it as another tremor rippled through the chamber. The crystal pillar emitted a sudden deep tone like a bell rung underwater, resonant, ancient, powerful. The sound rolled through the mountain, and the mountain answered. Stone roared. A chunk of the ceiling crashed down where Rowan had stood seconds earlier. Echo darted ahead, claws scrambling. Cade followed, clutching the radar case. The tunnel narrowed fast, forcing them to crouch, then crawl. Rowan's shoulders brushed the rock, panic flickering up his spine. Sweat stung his eyes despite the cold. "Easy," he whispered to himself. "Breathe." Echo looked back, tapping her paw slow and calm, grounding him. Rowan focused on the sound of her breathing. Steady, confident. He pushed forward. Behind them, the chamber groaned with catastrophic weight. Rowan could hear the domino collapse of stone, the regulator's tone deepening into a long, mournful note that vibrated in his teeth. They burst into a secondary chamber, smaller, circular, lined with rusted metal struts. "I know this layout," Rowan whispered. "This is an emergency bypass tunnel. Old mining architecture." Echo sniffed frantically at the far end where the tunnel forked into 3 dark passages. "Which way?" Cade asked. Echo chose instantly second tunnel. Tapped her paw once. "Right path." They ran. The shaft sloped upward, curving through the mountain's interior. Echo sprinted ahead, weaving around broken beams and collapsed timbers. Rowan followed, lungs burning. Halfway up the shaft, the ground jolted violently. "Keep moving," Rowan shouted. But Echo skidded to a stop so abruptly, Rowan almost crashed into her. "What is it?" Echo barked, sharp and alarmed, then bolted into a narrow offshoot barely tall enough for her to squeeze through. Echo Rowan grabbed the rock wall and peered inside. A human voice echoed faintly from the darkness beyond. "Help! Somebody!" Rowan's chest seized. Cade's face drained of color. "That's a person." Rowan's pulse hammered. "Echo, show me." Echo crawled into the tight passage ahead of him, barking desperately. Rowan followed. The offshoot opened into a tiny cavity, where a collapsed wall trapped a man beneath a pile of timber and stone. He was barely visible under the rubble face, white lips trembling. Cade gasped. "Mason. That's Ranger Mason. He's been missing for 2 days." Mason wheezed. "Knew. Someone would hear." Rowan knelt beside him, adrenaline spiking with purpose. "Echo heard you. She always does." The dog pressed her nose to Mason's cheek, whining gently. Rowan assessed the debris, his legs crushed. "We need leverage." Cade dropped the radar case. "Use it." Rowan braced the case beneath the largest timber, wedged his shoulder against the beam and pushed. His muscles screamed, veins burning. The beam shifted an inch, then 2. "Again," Cade said. Rowan snarled through clenched teeth and heaved. Stone tumbled aside. Mason cried out as his leg came free. Rowan hauled him up, slinging Mason's arm over his shoulder. "We've got you." Echo barked twice encouragement. But the mountain rumbled again, this time a deep rolling thunder that made the walls vibrate. Cade looked back down the shaft. "Rowan, the regulator chamber just collapsed." Rowan tightened his grip on Mason. "Then we move now." They scrambled up the shaft, Echo leading. Snowlight appeared ahead, faint, distant. "Freedom." Rowan surged toward it, Mason groaning with each step. Then Echo froze. Not from fear. Recognition. She stepped into the light and growled. Rowan stumbled to a stop. Someone stood at the tunnel's exit, silhouetted against the snow-lit dusk, tall, sharp posture coat whipping in the wind. A woman's voice carried down toward them. "Rowan Hale. So you did survive the chamber." Cassandra Rourke, smiling, waiting, and not alone. Two armed guards flanked her. Cade raised her pistol. We're blocked. Rowan's grip tightened on Mason. Echo stepped forward, teeth bared. Cassandra lifted a small detonator. "Don't bother climbing," she said softly. "The ridge belongs to me." She pressed her thumb down. The ground above them began to break. Snow cracked overhead as Cassandra Rourke pressed her thumb fully onto the detonator. The ridge groaned like the spine of a living beast under too much weight. A fracture line shot across the tunnel entrance, spidering toward Rowan with terrifying speed. "Back," Rowan barked. Cade dragged Mason away from the exit, while Echo sprinted ahead, shoving her body against Rowan's leg, her signal to move now or die here. The ceiling split. A slab of ice and rock pitched inward. Cassandra stepped aside with chilling calm, as debris thundered into the passageway, sealing the exit under a mountain's worth of stone. Rowan shielded Echo with his arms, while Cade tucked Mason beneath her. Silence followed. Thick. Suffocating. Only the distant scream of shifting stone echoed through the tunnel. Cade coughed dust-blinking tears. "We're trapped." Rowan's ears rang from the collapse. He tasted iron. The air tightened as dust choked every inhale. Cassandra's voice filtered through cracks in the rock, distant but unmistakable. "Rowan, this isn't personal. The aquifer belongs to the future, not relics guarded by ghosts. Walk away. If you climb deeper into my work, you'll die under it." Wind swept past her words as she turned and left boots crunching on snow. Echo growled at the sealed wall hackles, stiff tail rigid. Rowan slammed his fist against the rock. Dust rained from the ceiling. Coward Cade wiped her mouth. "Save it. We need oxygen." Rowan forced himself to breathe, slow and measured. "We follow the shaft. There's an alternate exit somewhere. Old mines always have another route." Mason weakly tugged Rowan's sleeve. She wanted to kill me too. I overheard something about drilling through the regulator, rerouting the water table." Rowan exchanged a look with Cade. This wasn't sabotage. This was land theft on a geological scale. Echo paced in tight circles, nose to the ground. Her tail snapped once alert. She bolted down the tunnel, stopping at a narrow crevice on the right. Rowan crouched. "Is that—" Cade raised her headlamp. A faint draft stirred loose grit on the floor. "Ventilation duct. Maybe leads to a maintenance shaft." Echo squeezed inside without hesitation. Rowan helped Mason crawl through. The space was tight, barely shoulder width. Rowan followed last the rock, grazing his back as he pushed through. Halfway down the duct, his breathing hitched. Darkness pressed too close, air too thin, walls too tight. Memories slammed into him, the collapsing tunnel overseas, men screaming under rubble, the suffocating dark swallowing sound and breath. Rowan froze mid-crawl. Not again. Not again. Not again. Echo sensed it instantly. Her head snapped back toward him, pupils wide. She crawled backward, something dogs rarely manage, until her nose touched his. Tap, tap, tap. Her paw pressed against his arm. Slow, rhythmic. "You're here." "I'm here. We move." Rowan closed his eyes. He matched her tapping. 1, 2, 3. His breath steadied. The panic receded. "Okay," he whispered hoarsely. "Let's go." He crawled forward, following Echo's taillight, the tiny, bouncing reflection from her collar like a lantern guiding him through hell. The duct opened into a vertical service shaft lined with rusted rungs. Echo jumped effortlessly onto Rowan's back, then leapt to a ledge halfway up, perching like a mountain goat. "Show off," Rowan muttered. Cade snorted despite herself. "She's smarter than we are." Mason wheezed. Rowan checked him quickly. "You still with us?" barely Mason rasped. "We get you out," Rowan said. "Promise." He meant it. He wasn't losing another man underground. Cade slung Mason's arm over her shoulders, climbing with careful, practiced movements while Rowan climbed below to spot them. Echo climbed fastest, making small whines to guide them upward. Every 50 feet she tapped her paw against the metal rung we're going the right way. But something changed as they ascended. The air grew warmer. Wet. Too wet. Cade noticed it first. "Rowan, do you hear that?" A faint roar. Steady. Growing louder. "Water," Rowan said quietly. "A lot of it." Echo snarled at the upper reaches of the shaft. Rowan reached a grated platform and hoisted himself up. He twisted the grate aside and pulled Cade through with Mason. The chamber beyond was massive, an old mining reservoir abandoned decades ago. Rusted support beams jutted from the walls. Pools glistened on the floor. And at the far end, a drill rig, a compact industrial unit thrummed angrily, pumping high-pressure force into the rock. Echo barked twice, then 3 times. "Danger! Immediate. Structural. Rowan's voice was tight. She's already drilling into the aquifer. Cade ran to the rig's control panel. She's forcing a breach. If the water bursts through uncontrolled, the ridge collapses, Rowan finished. Echo darted to a pile of crates, sniffing aggressively. She pawed at one crate until it toppled. Inside, detonation packs, wiring. A remote trigger. Cade went pale. They're planning to blow whatever the drill doesn't puncture. Rowan clenched his fists. We disable it. As he approached the drill, Echo suddenly whipped around, ears flattening. She sprinted toward Mason and began barking in sharp staccato bursts. Echo what Mason collapsed. Cade caught him, lowering him gently. Hypothermia. He needs out of here fast. Rowan pressed 2 fingers to Mason's neck. Pulse faint, shallow. Echo, he whispered. Find another exit. She ran. She searched. She tapped once, twice, no. Again, no. A third time, tail straight path found. Echo stood at a narrow break in the far wall where old support beams had rotted through. Cold air leaked through the crack. Cade hefted Mason. I'll take him up. Rowan, you need to shut down the drill, Cade Rowan began. She looked him directly in the eyes. Don't let them take this mountain. Rowan nodded, swallowing hard. Go. Cade squeezed through the break, with Mason Echo guiding them upward. Rowan watched them vanish into the darkness. Then he turned to the drill. The hum grew louder, the vibration rattling the stone under his boots. A pressure wave slammed into his chest, followed by an ominous hiss from deep within the rock. Come on, Rowan whispered, ripping open the panel. Wires sparked. Alarms screeched. A gauge climbed rapidly toward the red. Water pressure. Too much. Too fast. Rowan dug through the wiring, a mess of illegal modifications, cheap components, and explosive leads. He traced the detonation line. Rowan froze. The detonator wasn't just tied to the drill, it was tied to the structural supports of the entire reservoir chamber. This isn't sabotage, Rowan whispered. He saw the blueprint in his mind, the old mining architecture. The chamber they were in was a gateway. The regulator chamber was only the beginning. They're collapsing the whole mountain. The midpoint revelation hit with cold, nauseating clarity. Cassandra wasn't just stealing water. She was engineering a destructive landslide, one that would wipe out the ridge, the forest, the rescue station, and the entire valley below. A man-made disaster staged as a natural collapse. Rowan's pulse hammered. I have to stop this. He dug deeper into the panel, ripping wires with gloved fingers. Something clicked behind him. Rowan spun. An armed guard, unconscious earlier, had crawled through the shaft. Blood matted his brow, but his rage burned bright. He lifted the detonation trigger Cassandra had dropped. No, Rowan lunged. The guard pressed the switch, but nothing exploded. Instead, all lights died. The drill whined into silence. The reservoir chamber sank into darkness. The mountain fell dead still. Rowan froze in terror. This isn't over, the guard hissed. Under their feet, a deep rumble began. The water pressure had reached the threshold without the drill. The aquifer burst. A thunderous explosion of water erupted from the rock wall behind Rowan, slamming him backward. He collided with the ground, skidding across wet stone toward a gaping shaft. Echo somewhere above sensed it. She barked. 1, 2, 3, now. The flood hit. Rowan was swept toward the abyss. He clawed at the slick stone fingers, slipping, losing grip, losing ground, losing everything, until a set of powerful jaws clamped onto his jacket sleeve. Echo held. Her paws dug into the stone. Rowan dangled over the drop, roaring water beneath him. Echo trembled, pulling, refusing to let go. Above them, new cracks split the reservoir ceiling. The entire mountain was seconds from collapse. Echo's jaws trembled as she held Rowan's sleeve, every muscle in her frame quivering under the strain. The weight of the flood-driven veteran dragged her slowly toward the lip of the shaft. Echo hold, Rowan shouted, voice raw with panic. Her claws scraped deep gouges in the stone. Water pounded across her flank. She growled a deep, guttural refusal and shifted her weight sideways, seeking better traction. Crack. A chunk of stone beneath her paw snapped and fell away. Rowan dropped several inches with a jolt that sent pain lancing up his shoulder. He gasped, scrambling for any handhold, none. Only slick stone. Only the roar of the flood below. Don't let go, he whispered. A whine, a soft, determined sound vibrated through Echo's throat. Then she moved. Echo launched her weight backward, using the last of the stable ledge. Rowan's body swung sideways, slamming into the wall, but the change in angle gave him a moment to hook his free hand around a jutting support beam. He hauled himself upward legs, flailing against the empty air, until finally, his knee hit solid ground. He rolled onto the platform chest, heaving water pouring around them. Echo collapsed beside him, panting. Rowan pressed his forehead to hers. "You saved me," he breathed. Echo tapped his chest once with her paw, an unmistakable, of course. But the relief lasted seconds. Above them, the ceiling groaned, an agonized metallic scream as beams buckled in rapid succession. "We need to move," Rowan gasped, grabbing Echo's harness. A fist-sized rock crashed down where his head had been moments earlier. The second escalation had already begun. Rowan sprinted up the incline of the chamber, Echo bounding beside him. The water rose behind them, swallowing the floor inch by inch. The guard who had triggered the flood staggered to his feet, blood running down his brow, weapon shaking in his hands. "You ruined it," he snarled, raising the pistol. Before he could fire, Echo barreled into him, knocking him flat. Rowan didn't stop. He yanked the gun from the man's grasp and tossed it into the water. Echo stepped onto the guard's chest, holding him down with a single forepaw teeth bared. "No time," Rowan barked. "Leave him." Echo obeyed instantly and sprinted after her handler. They climbed toward the narrow exit Cade and Mason had taken the shaft Echo discovered. The rumbling intensified. The far wall split open and a geyser of water shot through the crack like a cannon. Rowan felt the shockwave hit his spine. "Hurry," he shouted, voice drowned by water and collapsing stone. Echo reached the shaft, first squeezed through, and barked loudly, urging him on. Rowan followed, but froze halfway through. Light flickered ahead, unnatural. Electric blue, harsh, like arc lamps set in the stone. "No," Rowan whispered. They weren't at the exit. They were in another constructed tunnel, a maintenance corridor, stabilized with steel. The very infrastructure Cassandra had rebuilt, secretly beneath the ridge. She'd expected the mountain to fall. She'd given her crew an escape route, and Rowan had just walked into it. Echo let out a sharp warning growl. The corridor ahead echoed with bootsteps. Voices, armed, close. Rowan ducked behind a steel brace, just as two of Cassandra's guards rounded the corner, flashlights slicing through the dark. One guard said Rourke wants confirmation. She said Hale probably drowned back in the reservoir. The other laughed. "He's a ghost. Let the water have him." Rowan clenched his jaw. Echo pressed against his leg, still silent, waiting. The men passed. Rowan grabbed Echo's collar. "Come on." They started forward until a cold voice rang from behind. "You should have stayed buried, Rowan." Cassandra Rourke stepped into view at the far end of the corridor, a pistol raised calm as frost. The third escalation hit like a hammer. Rowan instinctively reached for a weapon he didn't have. Cassandra's finger moved toward the trigger. Echo tensed. No cover, no exit, only speed. "Step forward," Cassandra ordered. Nice and slow. Rowan raised his hands. "There's still time. Shut down the breach, save the ridge. You of all people should understand sacrifice," Cassandra snapped. "You buried men for the greater good. I'm burying a mountain for progress." "That's not progress," Rowan said. "That's erasing a future that doesn't belong to you." Cassandra's jaw tightened. "Goodbye, Hale." The gunshot cracked and Echo moved like a bullet. She hit Rowan full force, knocking him sideways. The round ripped past his ear, striking sparks from the metal wall. Echo skidded, regained footing, and charged Cassandra in a blur of fur and fury. "Echo no," Rowan shouted. But she was gone. Cassandra fired again, the muzzle flash, lighting Echo's face mid-leap. Echo twisted in the air, avoiding the shot by inches, and slammed into Cassandra's arm. The pistol clattered across the floor. Cassandra screamed, grabbing Echo's scruff and throwing her aside. Echo hit the ground, hard-rolled, and landed on her feet. Rowan sprang forward, grappling Cassandra, shoving her against the wall. She gasped, clawing at his arms. "You don't get to decide this," she spat. "You don't get to destroy people's lives," Rowan snarled. He slammed her hand against the wall, pinning her wrist until she dropped the detonator she still carried. Echo seized it in her jaws, darted back, and crushed the trigger mechanism under her teeth. Sparks flew. The device died. Cassandra screamed. No. Rowan shoved her to the floor, hands trembling with adrenaline. But the mountain did not care who won. A deafening crack split the corridor. Stone dust filled the air. Water surged from the reservoir tunnel behind them, finally breaking through its containment. "Move," Rowan yelled. Cassandra scrambled to her knees to run. Echo growled, ready to chase, but Rowan grabbed her harness. "No, with me." They fled up the corridor as water exploded behind them, smashing metal panels off the walls. Rowan's knees screamed with every bound breath, heaving muscles locking. Echo raced beside him, barking wildly as the tunnel shook apart. The water chased them fast, violent, unstoppable. Ahead a ladder, a single vertical shaft leading upward. "Echo climb," Rowan shouted. Echo leapt claws, catching the first rung scrambling upward like she'd trained for it her whole life. Rowan followed feet, slipping hands raw. Water roared below. Cassandra tried to follow, but the flood hit her first. She screamed, swept away in an instant, her voice vanishing under the surge. Rowan climbed faster. Up, up, up. Echo reached a hatch at the top and pawed frantically at it. Push it, Rowan yelled. She braced her shoulders, teeth bared, and shoved her full weight upward. The hatch burst open. Light poured in. Fresh air, merciful holy air rushed down the shaft. Go, Rowan gasped. Echo scrambled out. Rowan followed, dragging himself onto solid ground as the mountain exhaled a final shudder. The shaft behind them erupted with water, blasting the hatch into the trees. Rowan collapsed onto the snow, chest heaving. Echo pressed her nose into his cheek, whining softly. He wrapped both arms around her and held on. You saved us, he whispered. You saved all of us. The rescue crews arrived just after dawn. Cade and Mason had exited much earlier through the alternate shaft Echo found, and they had called for help. Search and rescue teams swept the ridge, finding Rowan and Echo huddled under a wind-battered spruce. Mason, leg-splinted face, pale, insisted on being the first to greet him. You stubborn mountain goat, Mason rasped. Rowan laughed, weak and disbelieving. Takes one to know one. Cade knelt beside Rowan, checking his injuries. You stopped her, didn't you? Rowan nodded. Echo did. Echo wagged her tail, once small, proud. When they finally descended from the ridge, the valley below was still intact. The town was safe. The aquifer stabilized. The landslide never came. Days later, Rowan addressed a packed community hall. Cade stood beside him, Mason in a wheelchair, the townsfolk crowding every aisle. Rowan spoke simply. Cassandra Rourke tried to take a mountain, but she forgot something. He rested a hand on Echo's head. A mountain fights back. The hall erupted in applause. Later, after the crowds thinned, Mason wheeled up beside Rowan. Mason said most people who come this close to dying move somewhere warmer. Rowan chuckled. Maybe I'm done running. Echo tapped his boot 3 times. Decision made. Cade approached with paperwork. The county wants you to head the new Ridge Monitoring Task Force. Full authority. Full resources. Rowan blinked. Me. You know the terrain better than anyone, she said. And you listen when the mountain speaks. Echo barked sharply agreement. Rowan looked out the window where the ridge rose dark and steady under the evening sky. The mountain had broken him once. Now it had given him back to himself. He whispered to Echo, "All right, girl, let's stay a while." Echo leaned against him. Outside, the ridge rumbled softly, not a warning this time. A welcome. Spring came slowly to the northern ridge, as though the season itself feared disturbing what winter had nearly stolen. Meltwater trickled along the stone faces, carving bright lines down the mountainside. Pines swayed in soft gusts that smelled of thawed earth, sunlight, and distant rain. Rowan Hale walked the old trail above the recovery site, Echo trotting at his side. Her gait had regained its easy confidence, alert, steady, always listening. Every so often she'd pause, place her paw gently on the ground, and glance up at Rowan, as if asking, "Do you feel it too?" He always smiled. "Yeah," he said. "Still here." Below them, the valley breathed again. Fresh green dotted the slopes. Water flowed through the restored creek bed with a clarity Rowan hadn't seen in years. The ridge, bruised and bent by the drilling, had survived, and like him, it was still healing. Sheriff Cade had spent weeks documenting every last piece of Cassandra Rourke's operation, the forged contracts, the illegal drilling rigs, the explosives wired into the old mine. The federal investigators had taken over now. They said Rowan's evidence, combined with Echo's directional tracking and the rescue logs, would become a case study in environmental crime prevention. Rowan didn't care about any of that. He cared about the quiet. He cared about Echo sleeping beside his bunk every night, one ear always pointed toward the door. He cared about the ridge standing tall against the morning light. They reached an overlook where the world opened wide. Rowan stopped. Echo sat at his boot tail, curling around her paws. The air hummed, not the violent thrum of collapsing stone, but the soft, living hum of a mountain breathing freely again. Rowan rested a hand on Echo's back. "You know," he murmured, "they offered us medals. Commendations. Some kind of plaque." He shook his head, smiling softly. "You don't need one. I don't either." Echo leaned into him, warm and solid. He watched the wind move over the pines like a slow ripple across water. For years, he'd lived with the feeling that the world had become too heavy memories of fallen friends, the faces of men. He couldn't save the crushing silence of tunnels that collapsed too soon and too fast. But here Here, the silence didn't suffocate. It steadied. I thought I was supposed to outrun my past, he said. Thought if I kept moving, it couldn't catch up. Echo nosed his hand, gentle, firm. Rowan exhaled. Turns out you were right. I didn't need to outrun it. I needed to outgrow it. A loon called from the lake far below, a long, mournful note that rose into a hopeful trill. Echo's ears perked, and she let out a soft, approving woof. Rowan smiled. Yeah, feels like a good sign. He knelt beside Echo, looking into those amber eyes that had seen him at his worst and stayed anyway. You saved me, he said quietly. Not just in the tunnel. Every day since I met you. Echo rested her forehead against his shoulder. The sun dipped, painting the sky in warm gold and ember red. The first evening stars blinked to life sharp, bright, unafraid. Rowan stood brushing snowmelt from his knee. Come on, girl, he whispered. Let's head home. They walked back down the trail side by side, shadows stretching long behind them. The ridge towered above, steady and sure, as if watching over its two unlikely keepers. Every crunch of snow beneath Rowan's boots felt like a heartbeat. Every breath of wind felt like a promise. Some miracles aren't loud. Some don't come wrapped in thunder or light. Some arrive on four paws with a quiet persistence that refuses to let you fall. Rowan knew that now. And as Echo tapped her paw 3 times against the ground, her way of saying, all is well, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Grace settling like dawn, and a future waiting patiently for him to walk into it. End.